Hi everyone, Chris from Meander, just with another quick update video just to talk through one of the biggest challenges that we always get asked in a recruitment organization is when will my role be filled? And what I'm going to try and explain is why it's so hard to sometimes predict that using some pretty basic supply chain modeling techniques that I'd previously used in supply chain work and actually applied as we were looking at modernizing our global recruitment organization and bringing more kind of data-driven approaches to it. And so when I first moved into recruiting, I had this impression that there's a certain number of activities that you have to take in order to deliver a hire. And so what you can see on the chart here, it looks a little bit complicated, but when you break it down, you can start with opening a brand new role. And the first thing you're going to do is start looking for prospects. So you'll generally search either through your inbound funnel or most likely go to LinkedIn or another talent marketplace to start searching for different profiles and prospects. Out of maybe 1,000 prospects, you'll get maybe 100 that you want to reach out to. So there's maybe a 10% pass through rate through that layer. So the next day, you'll reach out to some of those prospects, but you also continue doing your initial viewing and kind of shortlisting. And that process will continue. You'll gradually move people through to get them on the phone, to get them in for a screen, interview, and then make hires. And so what you can see here is that flow. And as you get through the critical mass, so you go through the first 1,000 prospects you outreach, 100 that you actually contact, and then go through the interview process, you eventually get a hire. And this is how I expected it to work. You have this kind of like steady state of moving through hires every kind of couple of weeks. You get a new hire, and that's kind of how it works. You reach a steady state, and that's how you recruit. What I actually found when we started to look at the processes is it's actually more like this. You actually have a lot more variability in the processes day to day, and there's a million different reasons why this can happen. But ultimately, what's happening here is that there's variability in the top of funnel in how many prospects you actually get to view, or variability at any point throughout the process. That creates a what's called a bullwhip effect, which impacts the whole process. And so what actually happens is you don't get the critical mass to generate those hires at the end, and you have this kind of very uneven distribution. So it's actually very hard to predict when the hire is going to take place. And so in this example here, we've actually gone from 4 hires over a 60-day period to actually only making 1 hire, and probably expect one more to come pretty soon. But that kind of like 1 hire a month versus 2 hire months is a pretty common diagnosis for funnel-based problems. And what you can actually do is if you map out the whole process, you can see how I've done it here. And again, I'll give you access to this spreadsheet afterwards so you can kind of go in, examine how I've kind of looked at the different approaches. But you can see that there's different kind of pass-through rates based on historic examples of how many candidates you've had to read in order to find people you need to contact, how many of those you can do per hour. And then there's kind of an assumption for working 6 hours a day of dedicated recruiting time. And I know based on a lot of people, that's relatively optimistic. But the thing to do once you've got the that kind of like whole process mapped out and you figured out where you're seeing some shortfalls is actually to go into a process mapping technique and actually look at the different bottlenecks that are occurring at each part of the process. This is something that we used to do pretty extensively in the supply chain world, but for each stage of the recruitment process, you can probably make an estimate as to what you think the bottleneck is. So it could be that the talent pool is pretty shallow. You're kind of trying to fish in a pretty small pond with very unique requirements. So there may be a high priority, and the action plan there could be that you want to go back to the hiring manager, actually redefine the search criteria to make sure that you're bringing in the right people, and you can actually broaden the top of funnel. And there's a whole list of example bottlenecks here, but essentially what you want to start doing here is working top to bottom to knock off these bottlenecks, because the bottleneck at the top will actually have an impact downstream, whereas the bottleneck down at the bottom, while it may be more impacting to closing the candidate, actually, if you're not getting the throughput of the candidates from the top of the funnel, you're actually never really going to build the critical mass for that to make a difference. So I hope that's helpful. Let me know if you've got any questions, and look forward to catching up soon. Take care.